Welcome Judge Raymond Rodriguez back to Wagner College. This is the second year that he's talking to our LC class on the American Dream. Some of you may be interested in pursuing the field of law or just having more insight into the field of law. And it's wonderful that he's able to speak to us about his trajectory, how he became interested in law school. He went to St. John's University and then Widener Law School. He worked in the Richmond County District Attorney's Office. And then he will tell us about his journey through the different legal, private, and public practice that he was able to accomplish before he had the honor of being the first Hispanic judge from Staten Island named to New York State criminal and civil court. Is that right?
Correct.
And when I read about Justice Rodriguez being nominated, it wasn't just his legal career that interests me, but because we had begun to teach the American Dream course, and in particular that I was teaching from Sonia Sotomayor's autobiography, the third female and first Hispanic Supreme Court justice on the United States Supreme Court, one of the 9 most powerful people in the entire country. When I sort of made this connection between her American Dream story as growing up in a Puerto Rican family in New York, I thought that having Judge Rodriguez here would be able to give us some insight into her journey, into the general issue of Hispanic Americans and the American Dream. And so, since we've all had a chance to reflect on our own American dreams in our families, I think this is a really great way to sort of build and extend that into understanding how the Staten Island community has supported Judge Rodriguez and his family, and how they've contributed and their accomplishments in helping to shape Staten Island. Before he speaks, I wanted to ask Leslie Lopez, who you know as a former member of LC1, the American Dream LC, to just say a few words, because in her second year at Wagner, she's now vice president of the Pre-Law Society, and in her own way, very much in the process of becoming an American Dream story too. So I wanted her to say a few words, and then I'm going to turn it over to Judge Rodriguez to talk about, all the things that really I think are so important in Sonia Sotomayor's autobiography. Questions like, how do you mentor people? How do you gain professional accomplishment in every field? It doesn't just have to do with law. His own sense of what it means to be a leader in his community and in his profession. And so he will talk about that, as well as give us a little piece of Staten Island history that's less well known about Hispanic Americans on Staten Island in the 1940s. So, but first let me have Leslie step forward and just say a few words about the Pre-Law Society, and welcome to Judge Rodriguez.
Well, first I just want to say thank you again for coming and attending this event. Actually, this is my second time hearing your story. But honestly, the first time when I heard it, I was pretty inspired, and it kind of touched me because it kind of related to my own experiences, especially growing up in a Hispanic family. And your accomplishments and your drive to achieve your goal kind of inspired me in a way to challenge my own fears. And I hope that one day I'll be able to make a change in my own community. So that's my big American dream, as Professor Weintraub would say. And to you guys, I just want to extend a welcome, and I hope your first year is going great. Like Professor Weintraub said, I am the Vice President of the Pre-Law Society. So for anyone who's interested in pre-law or has a general idea of, or is set on going, please come and attend. We help the students with preparing for the LSAT. We have help on how to choose your law school. Last semester we visited Cornell University, and we also visited Fordham. And we're hoping to continue with this. And if anyone has any questions or has a general interest, please feel free to email me. My email is leslie.lopez@wagner.edu. And it was great to meet you all. And go LC1.
I hope everybody doesn't mind that I just sit down. I had to work late last night in night court, so I'm a little bit tired, a little bit groggy, so bear with me a little bit. My name is Raymond Rodriguez. I'm a judge of the Criminal Court of the City of New York. Been a judge coming on about 2 years now. I was appointed by Mayor Bloomberg about 2 years ago. Professor Weintraub gave you a brief introduction about my professional career. I did start originally in the Richmond County District Attorney's Office under our former District Attorney, Bill Murphy. I stayed there about 5.5 years, where I handled all different types of cases, homicides, gun trafficking, drug cases, robberies, burglaries, at the end of my career there. After I left in 2004, I went on my own. I started my own law firm where I just specialized in litigation. I did criminal defense work, civil rights law, family court. Pretty much every court you can name I've probably been in, and I've probably tried some type of case there. I did that for about 10 years, and then during my time in private practice, I also taught at New York Law School. I was an adjunct professor there for about 5 years. That was probably one of the most gratifying experiences that I did have. It was great to teach first-year law students. They always kept me on my toes, always asking questions, and it really helped improve my own skills as a lawyer. Because before you can teach somebody something, you have to be very well grounded in the subject matter. So I thoroughly enjoyed that experience, and I now do see some of my students actually appear before me, which is quite ironic. I had always mentioned that to them, you know, maybe we'd be adversaries, but now they appear before me. A number of years ago, I was fortunate to be appointed by Mayor Bloomberg. I would not have been able to do it without the support of the legal community here in Staten Island. When I went for the appointment and put myself out there, a number of years before that, I was unsuccessful in the process, but I was supported by the community. It was a chance for me to introduce myself to the committee. In 2012, I was successful, and I wouldn't have had the opportunity to be successful if not for everyone in Staten Island rallying and championing my appointment. That's the one thing I could tell you, and I believe Professor Weintraub did talk a little bit about that. In life, you hardly accomplish anything by yourself. It's about relationships, it's about meeting people, and in those relationships, having respect, trust, loyalty, all those character traits are needed in establishing long-lasting relationships so that you can be successful in life. No one does it by them. No man or woman does anything by themselves. It's a community that comes together to help anyone succeed, and I would not have been able to do it without the connections that I made here in Staten Island, the community rallying behind me, the legal community, the political community, as well as the relationships that I had throughout the city with a lot of different leaders that saw my work, saw what kind of accomplishments that I had, and knock on wood, Mayor Bloomberg agreed. It's been actually a very interesting last couple of years. I would not have imagined from the first day that I was appointed to today, the people that I've met. Becoming a judge has opened a multitude of doors that in private practice were closed to me. I've had the honor to meet Justice Sonia Sotomayor a number of times, have conversations with her, speak to her. That's been unbelievable. Usually, most of the time, I'm extremely nervous. I thought I would never have that opportunity in my life to meet someone like that. And every time I meet her, it's always a cordial, very nice conversation. I actually met her at an event this summer. A student that I met at CUNY Law School established an internship program for minorities throughout the whole city, high school students, to expose them to the legal community. And I had met her speaking one night at a CUNY Law School, and she had told me about it. She was like, "Judge, could you agree to be a part of the program?" And I was like, "No problem." And later on, she had Justice Sotomayor lend her name to the program. So the culmination of the the internship was an event at the Circuit Court in Manhattan. She spoke, and every meeting I have with her, she does have the same comment towards me. She's like, they are making judges very young now, so when are you going to graduate high school? So I always find that funny, and that's something that she always says to me. But I remember reading her book. I don't know if anybody has read her book here. All right. When I read her book, what?
They will be reading it.
Oh, okay. When I read her book, it was given to me by a friend of mine, and I read it, and I saw so many common things. Her story, obviously, is not my story, but you know, the same experiences that she went through. I saw so many common things that I went through in my life. I believe her mom was a seamstress originally, became a nurse. All my grandmothers were, and my great-grandmothers were seamstresses. Her father worked in a factory. My grandfather came to this country from Puerto Rico and did the same thing. You know, had to work a number of years before he could bring his family over, before he could bring over my father and his siblings. And initially couldn't bring them right over, had to work here a couple of years, then finally brought my grandmother, then the whole family came. You know, I saw so many common things that it felt like I was reading my own story in some ways. I am a native Staten Islander. I was born, raised here. I'm raising my family here. My wife and my son, we live in West Brighton. I love Staten Island. I did go away to college and law school, but I came back here because this is my home. You know, I feel privileged to, you know, have that distinction to be the first native islander of Hispanic heritage to be appointed to anything in our county's history. So it's a nice little footnote, but I do feel that I owe an obligation, just like people have helped me out in my life here in Staten Island, whether they were my second father, who is Irish, who ensured that I got a job in Bill Murphy's office when the doors were closed to me. I went to him, you know, Mr. Dunn, could you help me here? And then within probably hours, I had a call from Bill Murphy, and I was hired the next day. So I do see, you know, that's the great thing about Staten Island. It's an open place where everybody comes together, no matter what nationality it is. And I've felt the benefit of that where everyone has helped me. I feel an obligation to continue that as well. Not only help people of my nationality, Puerto Ricans, but also Latinos, but help everyone. So that's why when Professor Weintraub called me, I'm, you know, wholehearted. I was like, whatever. I definitely could come. It's easy when I'm on night court because I don't have to go in and work the next day. But that's important to me. I think every generation owes that to the generation that comes, that's coming up, to knock down the doors and to help the next generation make it easier for them. You know, it's been a wonderful experience for the last 2 years. I've been assigned to Brooklyn Criminal Court, the busiest criminal court in our nation. I have a daily calendar of 80 cases. Usually I finish them up sometime close to the morning, and then in the afternoons I do you know, trials and hearings, which is the most satisfying part of the work, because when you're just doing a calendar, that's kind of boring. Trials are always fun. I really have nothing really to say as the beginning as my bio. My personal history, I'll touch on a little bit. My family first came here to Staten Island in the late 1940s, early 50s. My great-grandmother, Carmen Gonzalez, came here from Brooklyn, from the Bronx. Little sordid tale of our family. My great-grandfather had an eye for the ladies and never stopped with that, so my great-grandmother could not deal with that. So she took my grandfather and moved to Staten Island. She bought a house in Midland Beach. She bought it from a priest that was in St. Margaret Mary's in the late 40s and 50s, and that's how my family immigrated. The maternal part of my family immigrated here to Staten Island. My father was from Puerto Rico, immigrated to the Bronx early on in life when he was about 6 or 7 years old, and through chance coincidences, met my uncle on a line in Whitehall Armed Services Station, and they were volunteering for the United States Marine Corps, and they both had the same last name, and they hit it off, and he told him, come back to Staten Island. He saw my mom, and I guess that was it, and and eventually married my mother, and immigrated here. I've gone to every school, and I've gone to school here in Staten Island. I went to St. Dorothy's. I went to St. Joseph by the Sea High School. Went to St. John's University in Queens, and went to Widener University in Delaware, in Wilmington, Delaware. I lived for the first couple of years in Midland Beach, and then my family moved to Oakwood. But Midland Beach, growing up there as a young child, was a very tight-knit community, very multi-ethnic. There was a very big Puerto Rican population. Everybody was very close. I remember growing up as a kid, my first day in St. Dorothy's, I believe my kindergarten teacher, I believe either she was Irish or Italian. It was a very different experience going to school and having no one speak Spanish. Having everyone speak English, it was a little bit different, a little bit of a culture shock. I remember them asking my name. I gave them my Spanish nickname. They looked at me like I had about 7 different heads on me. But my experience in schools here and my experience has always been positive in Staten Island, and that's why I chose to live here and raise my family here. If anybody has any questions, I'm here to answer whatever you want. Yes, Professor.
I would just say this, we were discussing bilingualism, actually, just before you arrived. And so, could you say a little bit about your feelings on this question? I'll just ground the whole thing.
Well, I was always, I always knew English.
Right.
Most of my relatives, my grandparents, my paternal grandparents lived next to me for a period of time when I was a little boy in Midland Beach. I never had an English conversation with them. They only spoke Spanish. They only watched Spanish television. They'd get their rabbit ears with like aluminum foil on it to make sure that channel 47 or channel 41 they could get it. There was no cable back then. So that was just normal for me. That was just normal. I wouldn't think that there was anything unusual with that. I really didn't think it was unusual until I went to school. And every school that I went to, I was always the only Latino there. So, I didn't feel any prejudice or anything like that, but it's just, I was just different, So that's where I saw it, Professor. It was apparent. Even with my grandmother, my paternal grandmother lived until I think it was, she passed away sometime when maybe I was in law school. I'm trying to remember. But at that time I was dating my wife, and I had to translate for them. But my mom's side of the family, they were fluent in English. My mom's first generation here, so she was always fluent in English. But everybody just spoke Spanish. It was just something normal. To speak English was something different. Yeah. Yes, Liz. Well, we had a family attorney, this gentleman, Silvio Marasini. Unfortunately, he passed away a couple of years ago. And I remember as a little boy going in there, my parents would have different legal things, buying a home, I remember he would do taxes, and I just saw the respect that my parents gave him. I remember every time we had to go to his office, I had to like dress up in a little suit. And, you know, I just saw the people coming in and out of his office, how he helped people, and I thought maybe that would be something that I would want to do. And I think that's the most gratifying thing about being a lawyer, is really just being able to help people. You know, when I was in the DA's office, obviously I was able to help people who were, you know, victims of crime. And when I was in private practice for 10 years, that was actually very interesting, because people would come with all different types of cases, and you know, there's no better satisfaction than to help someone in a time of trouble. I remember I would always have something to say to my clients, especially my criminal clients, that would come in. Everything would seem dire. And if it was a serious case, you know, they were facing sometimes years, if not decades, in prison. I would always have this statement that it's always darkest before the dawn. So just relax, you're here, we will get through it, we'll have strategies to ensure that that you're treated fairly and justly. You know, you can't make any guarantees to people, but that there would be a strategy to ensure that the best possible result for them would happen. So, I mean, there's no greater gratification. And I've seen sometimes, every now and then I have to sit here and spell some of the judges in Staten Island. If we have so few judges here that if one of them takes a day off or vacation, sometimes I'll have to come over here and cover their parts. In Brooklyn Criminal Court, where I'm at, we have more judges than all of the judges put together in every court here in Staten Island. So one day I'm sitting there and I see a former client's mother in the audience. And I didn't realize she was sitting there waiting for a friend of hers to come in and, you know, be arraigned on new charges. So I saw her and I was trying to put my mind together of like, how do I know this woman? You know, she looks so familiar. And if anybody lives in Staten Island, everybody knows that we're separated not by 6 degrees of separation, but probably about like 1.5. Everybody knows each other. So afterwards, I get off the bench and I'm walking off for the lunch break, and she comes, oh, I heard about everything, we're so proud, everything. I had represented her son a number of times in criminal cases. And you know, just to see that, and she's like, thank you, you know, my son's doing well. Unfortunately for him, he had to go to state prison. He had some serious cases, but we were able to ensure that at least whatever time that he served was the minimum. But, you know, just to see that even people remember that and their thanks is, you know, is wonderful. And now as a judge, I get to, you know, help everybody, ensure that the system is fair, that everybody has, whether it be the prosecution or the defense, everyone gets a fair shake. Anybody else? Yes, sir. And I'll get to you in a second.
Did you ever like second guess that field? Like, did anything else interest you?
I wanted to become a history professor. That's what I did in St. John's University. I majored in history. I thought that would be something that I would be interested in, but you know, the law just had a pull to me. You know, I think the actor, the dramatic person, the person that wants to be in the limelight, it was too great of a pull. You know, being a litigator, you're out there, you're on that stage. When you're doing a jury trial, it's you. You're creating this little drama. So that always had an extreme pull for me. So I did think about being a professor, history professor, but the law was the way that I wanted to proceed. Yes?
Did your favorite types of cases change as you went from a litigator to a judge? Like which cases like you really want to which cases you like to?
You know, I really don't have a choice. It's in Brooklyn, the cases that come to my courtroom are just by geographic areas. So I cover, I think it's one of the busiest zones. It's called the Orange Zone. So I have a number of precincts in Brooklyn. So it's just whatever cases generate from those police precincts just come my way. I am able to get trials sent to me from other judges because I'm always looking for trials. I'm always looking to do something, you know, interesting, but it's just really random. It's really random. If I have night court, which we all have to do so much of it, I have to do 6 weeks because I'm one of the junior judges there. Some of the more experienced judges do, you know, 2 to 3 weeks. At that point, you can get anything. You know, I've gotten a number of high-profile homicides. I had initially the one, the gentleman that killed that one little boy in the elevator in the public housing project, and also stabbed the little girl. She survived, but he perished. I had that case for a little bit. I had a case actually right before I went for reappointment with Mayor Bloomberg, actually the day before I was to meet him for my final interview with him. I had the case where the gentleman in Sunset Park, the Asian man, killed his cousin's wife and their 4 or 5 children. He stabbed them to death. I had to do the search warrant. I'm not really sure if I did the arraignment on that case, but I had to do all the crime scene investigation. So it was very interesting. You know, I had something to talk about to the mayor the next day, you know. So on night court, you'll get those types of cases, you know, where the press comes in. But other than that, we really have no control. When I was in private practice, yes, you have control, but you know, one thing I liked about private practice is the variety of cases that would come in. You have a follow-up? Or?
Yeah, so it's not like trials, like what's the difference between, are you making all the decisions in those cases?
Well, those cases that are just on for the calendar, like I usually have about 80 cases and maybe somewhere in the range of about 10 people that are in jail, that are actually incarcerating pending their cases because they couldn't make bail. You know, they're at different stages of the case. You know, maybe some of them are on for me to make decisions on motions. Some of them may be set for trial, but the people may not be ready to proceed on that trial. They may be on for a number of reasons, for discovery. So they're just not ready to proceed to where we start calling witnesses. Excuse me. Yes, Professor.
Could you speak about Sonia Sotomayor a little bit more? I want to hear specifically, she's a first?
Correct.
And what it means to be a hyphenated American, Latino American. What it means to be a first. Do you get...
Well, I mean, it was wonderful. I remember when she was being nominated. It just, you know, fills you with pride that one of us would be on the highest court in the state. I mean, it really was an unbelievable experience. I would never have imagined in my own life, you know. I mean, I had dreams for myself. I'm very ambitious. But even that I obtained the judgeship so early on in my life, I would never have imagined that. You know, I pursued it, but, you know, things fell right for me. You know, you're in the right place at the right time. Meeting the justice, I mean, it's a wonderful experience. I've met her 3 or 4 times at different events. A good friend of mine, Judge Rivera, she's on our highest court, the Court of Appeals. Judge Jenny Rivera is very good friends with her. And I've met her through Judge Rivera. I've met her at different events that I've attended. What always impresses me about the justice is that, you know, you read in her book that she, you know, English wasn't her first language, and she had to work very hard on it. What impresses me now about her is how eloquent she speaks. It really is amazing. I saw her give a speech at this internship, you know, the ceremonies to end the internship. A half an hour, no notes, no stuttering, no stammering. Unfortunately, I don't have that gift. that she has. Just perfect. Her, you know, it just was eloquent. And I always tell her that. I'm just like, I'm so jealous of how she speaks. It's just really quite beautiful. And that's what impresses me so much about her.
But do you think her opinions get evaluated by the general public or the media as, you know, what I'm trying to say is that when Justice Kennedy writes an opinion, nobody thinks of like, oh, this is the opinion of an Irish Catholic, right? When, you know, when Samuel Alito writes an opinion, nobody thinks, oh, what is this Italian, I think he's from Jersey? Nobody
I don't know where Judge Alito's from, no.
I think he's from Jersey.
He may be, he may be.
I could be wrong. Anyway, but I feel like Justice Sotomayor is evaluated both as a justice in her own right and a Latina woman. Her biography is a filter that people use. I feel like this. I may be wrong. What do you feel like this goes on? And if so, is that fair?
I don't really see it in that way. I mean, all their opinions, whether they write the majority or they write in the dissent, even, I mean, in the Supreme Court, there's always has to be a majority opinion, all right, where we have 9 justices on the court. The reason why it's an odd number, so there's never a tie, right? There has to be a decision made on each case. Unfortunately, for the last couple of years, a lot of the high-profile decisions are 5-4 decisions. Whether 5 justices in the majority, 4 in the minority that don't agree with the decision. What is the ultimate outcome that should happen in the case? But even if the justices agree in the majority, most of them write concurring opinions. Yes, we agree in the decision, but we would have decided differently. Our rationale for that decision would be different. So, I mean, everyone analyzes all these opinions. I really don't see it. I think one of the opinions that was very much analyzed was the one dealing with affirmative action. I assume that's the one you're referring to. I mean, I think it got criticized and by a lot of people so much because she put a lot of personal things into it. And her unique perspective that, you know, these are things that helped her get where she wants. So I do think as to that, it's a little unfair because she brought that unique perspective to the court on that. And the legal arguments that she put in her dissent were valid. So I think that was, yes, a little unfair. But other than that, I think, you know, Justice Kennedy, a lot of times, I mean, his opinions get the most publicity because he's the swing vote. You know, he's the one that is actually important both to the liberal faction of the court and the conservative faction of the court. He's the one who actually is really the decider of how the court's going to come out in a lot of cases. Yes. Anybody else? Yes, Professor.
Oh, I have a whole bunch of.
Okay, I assume so.
I want to start just with tying it to Sotomayor. So the students don't know yet because they haven't read her autobiography that she went to Princeton, and as a freshman in her first semester like them at Princeton, her history professor tore apart her writing and said she didn't know how to write. And that's when she decided that she had to really apply herself, and she graduated from Princeton 4 years later with the highest prize in writing, the Pine Prize, that Princeton University gives for writing. So she really transformed herself.
Yeah, that's what I find so amazing, because Spanish is, you know, just different how we express ourselves in comparison to English. So in law, you want to have the active voice. You know, in Spanish, we do a lot of things through the passive voice, and it's not effective writing. And that was, you see in the book, when you read it, that was a big criticism. That's something that I would always stress to my law school students. You have to write in the active voice. If you write in the passive, you're giving up the initiative in your legal arguments. So that's what amazes me about her now. Her writing and how she speaks is so, it's actually perfect. You know, that I've said that to her a couple of times, and it just makes me want to strive to improve on those skills of my own.
And so what I remember from her autobiography is that story. There were stories about how when she first became a lawyer, how she developed skills to see things she didn't see before by listening better. And then the whole way in which she used mentoring in her life.
Okay. I mean, that's really key. I mean,
I remember when you came last year, you spoke a lot about mentoring. So I was wondering if you could just.
I've had a number of mentors in my life. The Professor Weintraub knows one of them, Manuel Ortega, a good friend of mine. When I first became a district attorney, we were the Puerto Rican Bar Association in Staten Island. So he saw me as a young DA, and immediately took me under his wing. He was a defense attorney, but here in Staten Island, everything's so close. You know what I mean? There was never, District Attorney Murphy never frowned on those kind of close associations. Mentored me. Some other mentors that I had was Tim Kohler. He's the executive assistant district attorney here in Dan Donovan's office. Mentoring, finding proper mentors is so important because they'll help you through, life's problems. As a young person, being impatient, wanting things now, no, Ray, you have to slow down. You have to, take baby steps, before you can walk, you need to learn how to crawl. All those things. Before you run, you need to know how to walk. Those kind of things. Stop, think. Just ensuring that you don't make mistakes. So mentors, you need to find people, and you need to find people that are willing to do that. I met someone when I was in New York Law School, another professor, this gentleman, Oscar Michelin, a very renowned attorney. He's actually partners with the governor's cousin in a law firm, and a brilliant attorney. So I remember when I would have defense cases, jury trials in Manhattan or Brooklyn, I would ask him, look, how would you handle this situation? And it'd be like a treasure trove. It'd be like opening a treasure chest and there'd be gold inside. So also being able to listen, just like Professor Weintraub talked about Sonia Sotomayor. You have to be able to accept criticism. I don't like criticism, but with criticism, you can grow. All right, that's very important. Mentors, listening, and then also just experiencing. I remember the first jury trial I did, I was scared out of my mind. I'm like, what do I say to this jury when I pick them? What do I do? I remember having those jitters. I remember the last jury trial I did. It was great, because I had all those experiences that I could rely upon. And you need to develop relationships with people that are willing to mentor you. You have to accept criticism, constructive criticism. It'll help you grow. You have to listen. You have to develop something called patience, and that only comes with age. And I'm going to be 41 in November, and I still struggle with that, patience. But that's something that you need to learn. Your time will come, but you just have to be patient. You have to be at the right place at the right time. That's so important. And what I would tell you is this, put yourself out there. Don't be afraid. Take risk. If I didn't take risk and put myself out there that I wanted to be a judge or I wanted to teach at New York Law School as a professor, if I said, people like, Ray, you got to be crazy. Nobody's going to hire you. The mayor's not going to appoint you. Well, then I wouldn't be here. So you have to take risk in life. And don't be afraid of, people, of failing. I failed many a times. I initially didn't get it, the appointment by Mayor Bloomberg, but it opened the door. They got to know who I was. After they told me the bad news, yes, I was disappointed. I was like, oh my God. But Mr. Ortega said to me, Ray, calm down. Calm down. Your time will come. And what I did was I wrote a letter to the chairman of the mayor's committee, thanking him, thanking the person who who conducted the investigation of me, who created a report for the committee for me.
How old were you at the time?
I was young. I was 2010, so how old was I? Maybe 36. I just had 10 years as an attorney, so I figured, let me put it in. I probably won't get it, but I got very far in the process. You know, going through the process of being appointed by a judge by the mayor, you have to go through about 6 interviews. And every interview, there's a group of people in it. So the next interview, you see that group, you know, diminished by a couple, and then it keeps on diminishing and diminishing. And at the end, the mayor has 3 people to choose from for every one position. So I remember I got to the full committee. I didn't get to the mayor yet, or to City Hall, but I got to the full committee. And you sit in this big boardroom of a big white shoe firm. It was overlooking, I think, St. Patrick's Cathedral. So I went to St. Patrick's, lighted candles, said a prayer, you know, figured anything that could help. And I believe on the committee there's 20 people, and the chairman sits next to you. And the chairman at that time was a gentleman named Zachary Carter. He's actually the corporation counsel for the city of New York. He was appointed by Mayor de Blasio. He was a former judge, a federal judge, a criminal court judge, a U.S. attorney for the Eastern District of New York, appointed, I believe, by Bill Clinton. He sits right next to you, and then they start firing off questions. And it's very much of an interesting process. But one day I was in court on a case in Manhattan, and I saw the woman that investigated me, this Asian woman from Queens. And she said to me, you know what? She goes, Ray, you know, you were one of the only people that ever wrote a letter to us thanking us when we rejected you. And it made an impact on her. And when I had spoken to Zachary Carter later on, he said the same thing. So when you fail, or when you think you perceive you failed in life, you always have to take the high road. You know, people look at that. How do you handle difficulties? How do you handle your successes and your failures? And you have to have class in both. People will pick up on that. And it helped me. So the next time I went before them, you know, I went through them. I think my interview before the full committee initially was about 45 minutes to an hour. The second time I went there, it was 5 minutes. And then I went to City Hall and went through all those interviews, and luckily was appointed. Any other questions? Yes, Professor.
So I wanted to just, one quick professional question, and then I wanted to talk about cultural.
Okay.
So, did you mention like how you decided as a lawyer that you were ready to apply to be a judge rather than just staying as a lawyer? What motivated you to?
I mean, I always wanted to be a judge. I mean, it's the penultimate position for any lawyer. So I always knew early on I wanted to do that. For whatever reason, I thought, I won't go into it, I thought my best chance would be with Mayor Bloomberg. You know, that he is he was nonpartisan, and that also he was someone that was promoting diversity. I thought I would have a chance. So when the 10 years came up and I was able to pass that threshold, I took some time off, about a week or two, to start preparing the application. It's quite lengthy. I think my questionnaire was over 200 pages long. And it took me about 2 weeks of every day, taking a few hours to do it. I mean, they want to know everything about your life, all the trials that you've done. And so that was always something, Professor, that I wanted to do. I knew I would try. And like I said to the class, I knew probably some people said, Ray's crazy. You know, nobody's going to appoint him. He's young. He's probably not even going to get an interview. He's not even going to get a call back. But I felt, look, take the risk, take the chance. I don't care what people say about me. I knew my credentials spoke for themselves. I knew I did quality work. That I was young, I knew that would always, I would have to deal with that. And I still deal with that when I go to, when I first got my courtroom part, they were like, well, who are you? Where's the judge? But once you get over that and people start seeing the quality of your work, then they get over that youthful appearance.
That's a great example of hard work, you know, the 200 pages of writing for something.
Yeah.
I wanted to go back to actually Professor Goj's question about bilingualism and culture, and if you could just say a few words about sort of the pull and push of assimilation and versus, you know, your own, you know, the sort of staying more in the Hispanic circles.
I mean, it's hard because it's like, you know, we live in an English world. I mean, so now with my son, he's about 3.5, so now I'm more getting back to speaking Spanish. There's a lot of Hispanics in our courtroom, a lot of Latinos, so it's, you know, for a period of my life, there was really nobody to talk to in Spanish. You know, the family had started to disperse. My grandparents and my great-grandmother had all passed away. You know, I went to the bigger world and, you know, I kind of lost some of that. Now it's come back since with my son to teach him Spanish. So there is a point, like when you assimilate, you lose that.
But the decision to teach your son Spanish couldn't have been made in a vacuum. You decided on this because presumably he would grow up speaking mostly just English. Right?
Yeah, I mean, it's a point. Like I don't want him to have to go through the same experiences that my father had to go through.
Right.
You know, in the 50s of coming here and not knowing anything and being stuck in a class with no bilingual education, and I don't know how he did it. I don't know how he did it. I don't know how my mother did it. You know, back then there was no bilingual education. You were stuck in a classroom, and I don't know how they survived. I don't know how they grew. I don't know how they learned. So I want to make sure that my son, you know, is well grounded in a foundation of English, but I want him to know what our heritage is, you know, and it gives me the opportunity now to, you know, improve on my own language skills, which my aunt still criticizes me on and rips me on, but
Spanish is not that good.
it's okay. It's not great, but it's, you know, I had invited Professor Weintraub to a Hispanic Heritage event that I planned at the criminal court where I work, and it was the only one ever done in the history of New York City criminal court. I had seen that there were so many Latinos in our courthouse. I thought it was something that we should do. And working with this one judge, Judge Evelyn Laporte, you know, when we did the planning, it was only in Spanish, so it was great. It was, it's always nice to hear your native language, you know, spoken, you know, and I enjoy that, and I want my son to have that same experience, you know. So I think it's important. My parents are teaching him. I'm teaching him. My wife's Italian, so it's.
Does she speak Italian?
No,
Yeah.
no. Her grandmother did, and but no, she doesn't speak it. So, but I think it's important that my son at least know that, you know, have an understanding, so that if someone speaks to him in Spanish, he understands it and can communicate back with them.
But this is sort of the question that Professor Rose started with was, do you think that in the United States today that it's beneficial, that it's necessary to be bilingual? And I think we slightly disagree about this because I really see much more assimilation, and I'm not confident that.
I mean, I tell you, the Latinos of my generation, it's just, there is that. I mean, I'm a first generation here, so I'm born here. I find a lot of it is assimilation. My language skills are not as good as my parents. You know, so through assimilating, I mean, you lose some of that. It's only, I mean, I think other ethnic immigrant communities have gone through the same thing. You know, I look at my wife. I mean, she's a third or fourth generation Italian, and now she doesn't have those skills, those languages.
There's variations within the Hispanic American community. Some retain Spanish, and so Mexican Americans tend to retain.
Well, I mean, they retain it, but even a lot of Puerto Ricans and Dominicans, they still retain it because of the neighborhoods they live in. As we disperse all over the country, you know, you lose that. My grandmother lived here, my paternal grandparents lived here in Midland Beach with us for a number of years, in the house right next door to us. But then they went back to the Bronx. And they went to a community, she lived on Jerome Avenue in the Bronx, not too far from Yankee Stadium, where nobody spoke English. You know, you could walk up and down and everybody spoke Spanish. You go to the market, everything was in Spanish. So if you stay in those communities, then, you know, there's really not much assimilation. But as you move out and you disperse, there's less people to speak with other than, you know, your family. Now that I'm in Brooklyn, I mean, there's a lot of Latinos there, so it's great. You know, I can speak every day with someone. My court interpreters, my fellow Hispanic Latino judges, court officers. So there's everything there. You know, while I'm back at home, it's just my parents and, you know, teaching my son. So I think you do lose it once, you know, that immigrant experience. Everyone kind of assimilates, moves away from, you know, the traditional neighborhoods. Yes, I mean, you lose that. You know, I've been able to hold on to it because I've made a conscious choice. You know, not only about the language, you know, cultural, you know, eating, you know, food, all of that. You know, music. I mean, I still listen to, you know, Spanish music, still watch Spanish television. You know, it's things I grew up with. You know, and having friends like Manuel Ortega, you know, different things like that, you know, help.
Do you think your are there students with
No, I want them to speak a little bit because they're just sitting there like.
Yeah, we have about 5 minutes left.
Yes, sir.
As a professional lawyer, do you see like a win-loss record of the cases?
Yeah, I mean, I was always, you know, you're always looking at that. Unfortunately, in jury trials, you know, there's different ways how you measure a win and loss. Yes, if you hear any attorney say that I've never lost a case in their life, well, they haven't handled enough. They're actually lying to you. Everyone loses. I mean, that's just the nature of things. You know, I look out on TV, some of these attorneys like, oh, I never lost a case. I can't believe that. You haven't tried enough cases. I'll tell you, jury trials and doing jury trials, it's so unpredictable. I've won my share and I've lost my share of cases. It's about the process. It's about being totally prepared when you go into court for all the possibilities. You know, I always played sports when I grew up as a kid. I played hockey, I played football. So, you know, you prepare for an opponent, you put a game plan in, and, you know, things change during the game. You know, you have to adapt. But if you prepare enough, those little changes within the game, you can rely upon your past experiences to deal with them. You know, it's just like in any case. You know, when I represented people that were charged with crimes, I mean, some of these cases, you know, there's overwhelming evidence sometimes. Some of these cases, I've had a number of cases where, you know, the offers have been to people 20 to life. You know, who's going to take that offer? You might as well go to trial. So I've represented a number of people that were charged with very serious offenses, and you would have to go to trial and you would have to figure out, with these facts, how do I create a compelling drama or a legal argument that puts my client in the best position to be successful? Maybe not to beat all of to beat some of the top charges. Maybe they get convicted of a lesser charge where the amount of time that they face is reduced. I had a gentleman that was a number of years ago, was what's called a discretionary persistent felony offender. He was facing 15 to life. And I had gotten him an advantageous plea bargain, but for whatever reason, he didn't want to take it. And I argued with him. I go, you're making a mistake. They have significant evidence against you. If you get convicted and we get the wrong judge, and this was in Manhattan, you know, they'll give you 15 on life. And you're 62 years old, you know, they'll release you from prison when they don't want to take care of you anymore. You know, you'll be going from prison to the geriatrics ward or a nursing home. You know, we argued, and at a point, look, it's your life, you want to take that shot. This is what's going to happen. This is what I perceive to be the evidence they're going to use against you. We'll make an argument, and we'll go from there. Unfortunately, we got a judge that gave us a fair trial, but I knew to be a judge that, for lack of a better term, it's a hanging judge. He'll give you a fair trial. He'll let you make your arguments, try your case. But if you get convicted, he's going to give you the max. And that's what happened. But I found out later the arguments that I made at his sentencing were the only legal arguments that I had, that what they were doing and how they tried to make him a discretionary persistent. You know, it's a whole hearing, evidence. They did it in a flawed way. The appellate division agreed with me, and the case got reversed. I found that out actually. The prosecutor who I tried the case in front of was now a defense attorney and appeared before me, and he goes, Judge, you remember that case? I was like, oh, yeah, what happened? The appellate division agreed with you. So, yes, that was a loss, but the guy went from 15 to life to 3.5 to 7 years in prison, and his life was saved. So, you know, it's all relative. You know what I mean? You have to sometimes take out of the worst situation, try to put your client in a situation where, you know, the wheels of justice are not too harsh on him. You know, and as a district attorney, yes, I mean, you're interested in victory, but you also have to be tempered by justice. And I remember Bill Murphy saying that to me, that if we find out, you know, something was done wrong, well, we disclose it, even if it hurts our case, because that is our obligation, ethical obligation as well as legal obligation. And if we find out somebody didn't do it, even though we indicted the case and it may be up for trial, then we dismiss the case. You know, and you may see that as a loss, but I believe that's like a victory, you know, because that's where justice has been served. So, you know, it's a hard question to answer because it means different things, especially to me. When a lawyer says that I've never lost a case, I think they're looking at it in a very skewed perspective. Yes, sir.
Did you know what field of law you wanted to practice in before applying to law school, or did you do 2 years in law school?
I mean, I really didn't know. I was just trying to find a job. I always wanted to become a litigator because I felt that if I learned how to do that, all the other things, all other fields of law are easy. You know, there's so few litigators. People are afraid to get up there and actually try a case. Even people that say they're litigators, you know, do whatever they can to avoid the courtroom. So I knew I wanted to do that. It just so happened that I told you one of my mentors, someone that always looked out for me throughout my whole life, my next door neighbor, this Irishman, Bill Dunn. He was a fireman, retired, very involved with the community in Oakwood, St. Charles. He looked out for me. I remember walking over to his house and across the street, and I knew he knew the district attorney, and I asked him, could you help me? He said, I remember his words, I'll see what I can do. And within probably like 4 or 5 hours, this is before like kind of cell phones or, you know, any of that stuff was apparent. Bill Murphy called my house, and I was over a friend's house, and my mom called me. You better call this guy right away. And then the next day I was in an interview, and then the next week I was hired. So that's just how it turned out for me. And it was just from like a mentor, someone helping me, and someone taking a chance on me. You know, and actually in a lot of senses vouching for me, saying that, look, if you give this person a shot, he won't disappoint you. Anything else?
Well, thank you so much. I mean, for all of that advice and insight, and really helping us think about leadership and as well as law and Hispanic heritage. So thank you for wrapping out one American Dream package for us, and we hope you'll come back again soon.
No problem. Anytime you need me, Professor.